There is an ancient story that King Midas hunted in the forest a long time for the wise Silenus, the companion of Dionysus, without capturing him. When Silenus at last fell into his hands, the king asked what was the best and most desirable of all things for man. Fixed and immovable, the demigod said not a word, till at last, urged by the king, he gave a shrill laugh and broke out into these words: "O wretched ephemeral race, children of chance and misery, why do you compel me to tell you what it would be most expedient for you not to hear? What is best of all is utterly beyond your reach. Not to be born, not to be nothing. But the second best for you is to die soon." Grab your drinks, guys. Welcome back to my channel. If you notice, the background is different and I have moved to the basement. It is very late at night and I decided that I needed to film this today instead of waiting for tomorrow, and I would have a little bit more time and it'd be a little bit easier for me to get into this without rushing. So, I filmed this earlier and I noticed that I didn't prepare very well and I didn't have enough time to talk about this topic, about this quote. And it's something that needs a great deal of categorization and organization. And I really had to sit down and write up some notes on this. So if you see me looking down at a piece of paper, that's why I am, because I really don't have the public speaking skills to be able to just say this off of the top of my head, even if I do know a lot about it. So, this is the King Midas quote. Get ready for this one, man. This quote is from a book called The Birth of Tragedy by Friedrich Nietzsche. And I'm sure it is, if you buy a book on mythology, you'll find it very easily in there. If you don't know who King Midas is a man who was able to, in Greek mythology, he was popularized because he was able to turn anything into gold. But that is besides the point. This quote itself, I wanted to talk about it because it's one of the most fascinating concepts that I've ever come across, and I generally obsess over it, so I wanted to do an entire philosophical video on it. This will be my first philosophical video, so I thought I should pay some respect to it and really take some notes and be more organized about it. So this quote is one of the most complex concepts I've really ever experienced in all of philosophy. Not because it's hard to grasp, but because it's very recursive and the nature of it is very meta. There's a lot of concepts that keep getting recycled and are within themselves, so it becomes a lot, which is why I try to categorize things and make it easier to digest, because it's a really cool concept, but you have to kind of know a lot of things from different places first. So, and the beauty of this quote really is that in itself, it's a law of nature and humanity, and it's kind of an orchestral tribute to existence in general. And the reason why I say orchestral is because there are so many different concepts that you need to understand first, and then they all come together in unison to kind of make up this quote. This is going to be a somewhat long video, I believe, but I have taken extra steps this time to be able to ensure that I am getting all the information in the right places and that I'm explaining it thoroughly, but not sitting here and thinking, looking at the ceiling the whole time. Part 1. Dionysus, Bacchus. So it says in the quote, Silenus, who is the companion, sounds weird saying Silenus because it sounds like my name but with something extra attached, so I feel like I'm going to be saying it weird from now on. But Silenus is described as being the companion of Dionysus, but who is Dionysus? Most people have really never been introduced to this mythological god unless you've taken maybe extensive courses on mythology, in Greek mythology, and Roman mythology. So Dionysus is generally described to be the god of wine, but that is a very PG version of what he really is, and for someone who does research on Dionysus, you will know that that is a very, very small snippet of what he really represents. So Dionysus as a whole, to surmise, Dionysus is the god of chaos, not just wine. I would say if it has anything to do with wine, it would have to be how you act after drinking too much wine, really, is what he symbolizes. Dionysus is an agent of chaos under Mother Nature. So him and his followers were worshipping chaos as a repercussion of Mother Nature, and they embraced it. And I mention this, his followers, because I want to mention the Bacchanal. And the Bacchanal is based on the name Bacchus, which is the Roman name for Dionysus. Dionysus is the Greek name. And the Bacchanal is a festival that is a tribute to the god Dionysus, and it is complete and total debauchery. And that is, to say the least, it's really, it's drinking, it's dancing, it's taking drugs, it's orgies, it's bloodshed, it's really a lot. And I will talk about him in another video more in depth because it can get really gruesome. But that is the gist of what the festivals are. And the reason why I mention the Bacchanal is because the Bacchanal is a symbol of decadence. And if you don't know what decadence is basically cultural decline through excessive indulgence. And it usually comes after the peak of civilization, or the peak of a society when they're at their best or at their most successful. The reason why I put the Bacchanal and decadence together is because at the time of the Bacchanal, like I said, Bacchus is the Roman name. After all of these festivals took place, of course, there was the fall of Rome, and it was a very significant part of history to show such an incredible, advanced, and intellectual civilization fall, right? So, and I'll explain why decadence has something to do with that. Part 2. What is nothing? So before we really dive into this quote, we have to define what Silenus means by nothing. Because if you don't know what nothing means in the context of this quote, you can't really move forward in it. So instead of giving you the dictionary definition, because it doesn't do much, it really doesn't explain what nothing means in this context, I'm going to give you a quote instead. Nothing is the provocative ambiguity of excess. Now you can see in this quote there is a kind of parallel between nothing and everything. Everything as in being excess. And whenever you have two parallels like that, there is a term that will come up, and the word is enantiodromia. Sounds really, it sounds like it's almost not a word. It sounds like a couple words put together. But it's a very fascinating word, and enantiodromia means everything in its extreme becomes its opposite. And I'm going to stop here because we have a lot more to get through, and this will definitely come up later. Part 3, Humanity and Progress. So we're at an interesting time, even though some people will say we're still in a very regressive state. Maybe not regressive, but a state in which we still need a lot of work. But from my observation, I'd say that we've come a long way, a really long way. And I think we're demanding a lot right now for the pace in which we're going, because we, in the past 50 to 100 years, we've progressed so quickly and we expect so much of our society. We've definitely gone in an upward slope, and we're consistently trying to refine ourselves and to progress and to move forward, right? That makes sense. Evolutionarily and as a society, you don't want to stay in a regressive mindset. So just think about our technology. Like I said, in the past even 50 years, we have progressed to a point that's almost unhealthy, I'd say, and unnatural. And I don't think that we're fully equipped to handle a lot of it. And that's not just technology, that's our politics, that's our ethics, and just society in general. We're really stepping our game up in the past 50 years or so, and being more liberal, being more understanding of other people's positions in life, and we're just trying to progress at an exponential rate. So I'm going to post some graphs here because I need to show some visuals for this. We have the cycle graph, we have the bell-shaped graph, and we have the Fibonacci spiral. Now, the best description for humanity is probably the Fibonacci spiral, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later. But the one thing to note about it is that in comparison to the other two graphs, although they all have a very, very similar meaning, even though they don't look like it visually, they do have the same meaning. The Fibonacci spiral is the only one that goes infinitely inward. The other ones are cyclical, and they repeat. Now, it would seem that the Fibonacci spiral would start over again once it gets to a certain point in this little spiral in the center. And you've seen the nautilus shells, just kind of keeps going inward and inward. And the Fibonacci spiral does not stop. It infinitely goes inward to ridiculous mathematical numbers and decimals. It doesn't start over at all. So as a society, as we were brought up, as society has dramatically shifted, I'd say, from very, 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 very early civilizations, this shift was made towards progress instead of a kind of cyclical way of living. We are always refining ourselves to the point of what I see as some kind of absolute purity or even divinity. We are just narrowing ourselves down so that we come to some kind of absolute basic truth. And I'll talk about that in another video because it's very interesting too. But the problem with the Fibonacci spiral, and I'm not talking about the Fibonacci spiral in the way that it's literally what its literal purpose is. I know that the Fibonacci spiral describes reproduction and certain kind of mathematics in nature, and how how people and nature grow, and the birth cycle and all that. I understand that. I'm talking mainly from a kind of systematic way of how the Fibonacci spiral works. So you would think that we would just kind of go and go and go until we get to some kind of absolute perfection, and it is never the case. I guess you could say it's the case for Buddhists that have gotten to nirvana and they've got to some kind of infinite, cosmic life. But as for the rest of humanity, I'd say that we are not there yet. And we have tried so many times, and we have never succeeded to kind of lift ourselves out of this human body and lift ourselves above that kind of life. And the reason why I believe this, not because I believe this, but because that history has shown this, we're never able to get past that certain point of evolution and progress, is because in history it has been tried so many times before, and it has only ended in failure and destruction. This is where these two graphs come into play. So you have the bell shape and you have the cycle. So the bell shape is we progress, and then we peak, and then we fall. The cycle is just showing that we are forever creating and destroying, and it's just an endless equal cycle the whole way through. And those two are extremely similar in that way. But we go back to the bell chart. This is the chart where we start to tie things together a little bit more, because after the peak, we have the fall, right? And the fall is 100% always guided by some kind of decadence, because at our peak, which I'll explain later, we experience these varying levels of choice, and we are at our height, and we exploit that, and then we fall. So decadence is kind of the conductor on our way down the hill. And this destruction gives birth to a new world, and it's through the ashes, and we just start all over again. As far as the infinite nature of the Fibonacci spiral inward, we will get there. Part 4. Existential dread. We all feel existential dread, I believe, to a degree, whether or not you realize what it is, what this anxiety of being alive really is. But what is it exactly rooted in? And I think people have been asking this question for a very long time. Why do we feel this anxiety about life and what we're supposed to do? And when Salinas says that death is the best option, when the second best is to die soon, what does he mean by that? It's kind of cynical, isn't it? And it begs the question, is Salinas saying is that humanity is suicidal in a way? And I would say yes, to a certain degree. Not suicidal as in the way that you probably think of it, but that humanity at some point just wants to end it. And you think about this, some of your worst days, you're just like, oh, like I just want to die. Like I don't want to deal with this anymore, right? I think we can all relate to that. And I have narrowed it down that the terror of existence is the terror of choice and the variation of experience. When you have so much to choose from, you become paralyzed by it. And at society's peak, we have so many options on how to live our life that it's overwhelming. It just overloads our circuits. And philosophy shows this all the time. If you read enough of it, you start to really ask yourself, why? What's the right answer? And with all these theories and choices, they start to lose their potency. It's like when you go into a grocery store and you want to buy cereal, and I'm sure at some point there was like 2 choices, and you picked between the 2 choices, and it was like, yeah, that one. But now you have 20 different cereals to choose from, and you are just torn. You're like, oh, this one's sweeter, this one looks cooler, this one dissolves better in milk, I don't know. But you have a harder time choosing between a vast majority of options as opposed to a couple. And because of that, they start losing their individual potency and saturation. So I use that as a metaphor, but this applies to philosophies, to religions, to choice in general. And when you have so many, you start to really get overwhelmed, and it's very hard to pick one and to see a very, very high value in one over the other. Because of that loss of direction and this kind of chaos of choice, we start to numb that pain of existence, and we resort to fantasy and escapism. Now, escapism is something like the Bacchanal, and for some, it's death. Some people need to die in order to escape the world that they live in because they can't take it anymore. That's a very grim topic. But death comes as a more symbolic thing, and it is very natural. Not suicide, but death in general is a natural state. It's a regeneration, right? But This escape is to relieve yourself of the suffering of existential dread and choice. And when you cut that off, when it's over, it is essentially a form of freedom. This is so scary. Like, I don't want somebody to look at this and be like, oh yeah, I wanna die. No, that is not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that in a symbolic way, and in the way of nature, and in what I'm talking about, this death that Silenus is talking about is an escape from reality, an escape from existential dread. And it is a form of freedom from the terror of having to choose between so many choices. And in that death and in that purity, it is, you are nothing. You cease to exist. You relieve yourself of the burden. Now, I said the Bacchanal is an example, but what is important to understand about the Bacchanal and the people who follow Dionysus or Bacchus is that they did not do the things that they did in order to escape. They were not escapists. They immersed themselves in the chaos and the terror on purpose. They used drugs, they used alcohol, dancing, orgies, sex, whatever, murder even, in order to immerse themselves in the chaos that Mother Nature exemplifies all the time. And because of this chaos and destruction, it was a type of regeneration and a type of creation that they were involving themselves in. In a way, they're kind of purists due to that. And you have the cycle yet again. Now, on the contrary, us as a civilization, we don't generally do that. When we drink, or we do drugs, or we have sex, maybe not sex all the time, but we use those things to escape. We use them to numb ourselves, to relax, to stop thinking so much about the world. And that is precisely the huge difference, the margin between those two. Lastly, we have part 5. We are returning to the Fibonacci spiral. So the Fibonacci spiral exemplifies our progress and desire for refinement to a degree, which is important, of regression and inversion. It's an infinite, literally, mathematically is an infinite move inward. And this is where enantiodromia comes back, and nothing and everything makes a reappearance. We whittle ourselves down to nothing in the pursuit of progress. And this overload of choice, like I said earlier, leads to a lack of potency. We're almost done. So because of this, everything becomes nothing. We expand until the vastness of it all caves in or dissipates. And everything is everything, which we can see that today with many different things. We see this kind of relativism all the time. And when you say one life is like another life and they're exactly the same and there is some kind of equilibrium between everyone, that means that, they even said it in The Incredibles. When everyone is super, then nobody will be, right? So we have to keep this kind of hierarchy in a way so that some people feel special, right? And so when everything is everything, that means that there is nothing. And in our attempt to overload ourselves with knowledge, and the morals and philosophies that we hold so dear seem to blend together, and they're hazy, and we don't understand them as well as we used to. They don't seem so clear and concrete anymore. They're not foundational, and they disappear into nothing. And we see this too with people who try to perfect themselves to a point where it literally kills them. where they are human and they try to achieve some kind of perfection or refinement or divinity, and their body, their human body literally can't handle it. And so they die or they work themselves to death. And in our struggle to discern what is right or wrong, we destroy ourselves in the process. And although this is nature's way, the society collapses, and that's where the death occurs. That's the death I'm talking about. And that is the death that Silenus spoke about. And as far as not to be born, not to be nothing, is simply to avoid the existential dread and the terror of choice altogether. Okay, so that's a lot to think about. If you have any questions, you let me know. My camera's about to die, so I'm being quick about it. But yeah, let me know what you think. That's one of my favorite quotes ever, and it's a great discussion to have with people. And if it was a lot for you, you know, message me. Let me know what you think. So thank you for watching. Thank you if you came back. Thank you if you're new here and you liked what I had to say. And good morning, good night, whatever. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.